Thanks for cutting all that intro out, Michelle. So, all right, everybody, we're going to get started. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Tonight, we're going to be focusing solely on chapter 8, which is emotion regulation. And backed by popular demand will be my colleague Robin Stern, who you met last week, who has done quite a lot of work in helping couples, especially, and adults, in finding strategies that work best for them to manage their emotions. And let me just share my screen. So hopefully you can all see that. And I'm going to ask everybody to just get settled in their seats right now. Let's take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. Let's bring ourselves into this space of permission to feel book club. Take a nice long inhale and an exhale. Okay. So emotion regulation. What the heck is it? Well, the way we define it at the Center for Emotional Intelligence is the thoughts and the actions. So it's things that we think about to shift how we feel and things that we do to prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance. So what does that mean exactly? Well, let's think about this for a minute. We can prevent unwanted emotions, can't we? We anticipate we're going to be anxious in a meeting and we can say to ourselves, okay, what can I do to prepare to be less anxious? Unfortunately, in our society, most of our emotion regulation is in that reducing it category. Stress management, anger management. We're so used to experiencing a strong emotion and we think, okay, I gotta deal or regulate that stress, that anxiety. But I think importantly, we have to think about initiating as a strategy for regulating emotions. Think about this. You're about to give a presentation, you're about to go into book club. I've had a long day, so do I just tell everybody, gosh, I'm exhausted and I think we're going to do this in a very dull voice because I barely have the energy to move tonight. I could yawn a little bit. um, Helpful or unhelpful? All of you would be asleep and, thinking, what the heck is going on here? And so there's initiating emotion, right? There's saying, okay, I want to feel inspiration. I want my people who are on the book club to feel inspiration. What's the strategy for getting us there? Does this resonate with you? That we can also create the emotions that will best serve us. Then there's maintaining emotions. I always like to think about this as raise your hand right here, right now, if you've ever had a good day. Come on. Anybody ever have a good day? Thumbs up? Yes in the chat? Only one person has ever had a good day? Okay, thank you. And how many of you have ever had somebody kind of rain on your parade when you've been having a good day? It happens a lot, doesn't it? Like, oh, what are you so happy about? My brother does this to me all the time. I used to do a lot of work in coffee shops, and he would oftentimes call me in the middle of the day to check in, and he'd be like, "What are you working on?" I said, "Oh, I'm really busy right now." He's like, "But I hear noise in the background." I'd be like, "Yeah," and he's like, "Well, it sounds like you're in a coffee shop." I'm like, "Yeah," and then he says, "Well, how? I don't understand this. Like, I thought you're working." I'm like, "I am working. I'm thinking. I'm writing," and and then all of a sudden I feel like shit. And then I hang up the phone and I'm like, wait, 3 minutes ago I was in a great mood. I was writing, I was in flow. And now all of a sudden I'm like irritable. So what's my bounce back strategy to maintain that positive flow state that I was in earlier? And then sometimes we just have to boost our energy or enhance, our feeling states. So emotion regulation, thoughts and actions to prevent, reduce, initiate, maintain, or enhance. Now, you can see here the word co-regulation, because one thing that we do too much in society is think that emotion regulation is all about the you. So Robin, who's going to be on in a minute, if she's irritable, I'm like, well, what are you going to do to deal with your irritability? What are you going to do to deal with your anxiety? And I think that we need to move away a lot from that perception that's always about the individual. So one misconception around emotion regulation is that it's about self-control and it's the person's job to regulate. It's a very Americana way of thinking. And so co-regulation says, well, guess what? For example, I, as your presenter today, Robin, as your co-presenter today, we have a responsibility as your teachers, as your compadres, to create an emotion that's conducive to your engagement. Think about this in relation to school. Has anyone here ever been in a webinar or an actual classroom or professional development situation where you were ready to pull your hair out or pop your eyes out? Where you could not take it. It was like you're just I cannot take this. I am going to lose it. If I sit here and listen to this person speak anymore, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to scream. I'm going to cry. I'll do anything. I have to go to the bathroom. No, I need an alcoholic beverage. No, I'm going to run away. Like whatever it takes to get out of the situation. And so that's because the presenter, the teacher, doesn't understand emotional intelligence. They don't understand that their energy is contagious, as we spoke about last week, that their energy, that their emotions are contagious. Now, lastly, when it comes to emotion regulation, we have to remember that emotion regulation is in the service of something. It's in the service of having well-being, making informed decisions, building relationships, and attaining goals. So it's not just, we don't just regulate for any reason. We regulate because if we say something that's really mean and hurtful, it's going to mess up our relationship. If we don't manage our anxiety, we're not going to have well-being. If we don't deal with the frustration about the goal that we're trying to attain, then our dreams aren't going to come true. We're not going to achieve that success. Let me stop there and just see any questions about the definition of emotion regulation. Just take a moment and any questions? Questions about definitional issues around emotion management. We're good? So co-regulation, Deborah, is a back and forth between people. And so the best example is a mother working with a child, and the child is crying, and the mother is making, like, it's okay, baby, 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 the little baby talk, the back and forth with the baby crying, and then you hug and you soothe. It's this kind of constant back and forth between people. So what I would say is that I wouldn't say trauma affects our co-regulation mechanism, but what I would say, Anotika, if I'm pronouncing your name right, is that we need to use trauma-sensitive strategies with co-regulation. And so if you know someone has had trauma in their life around abuse, or you wouldn't say, just close your eyes, because that may make someone feel more uncomfortable. You want to be careful around touch. You want to be careful around vocal tone. Things that might activate a person that would work against, the positive co-regulation process. So, Taraj, the question is that does regulating emotion imply So sometimes emotion regulation is um, implicit or subconscious, right? Where you just take a deep breath and not realize you've taken a deep breath, or you walk out of a room without realizing you're intentionally leaving the situation. One of the goals that we have with Ruler in our work and Permission to Feel is to move away from automatic, habitual, unhelpful regulation strategies to more deliberate, helpful strategies. They always have to reference goal success. And so, Steve, it's a really good question. And the the process of emotion regulation is about helping us to thrive and survive. Regulation is needed to be alive, right? As Freud said, if the id didn't have an ego or a superego, it might just eat itself or kill itself because it would be so out of control. And so, my point really is that we're not telling or supporting someone in managing their anxiety just for the sake of managing their anxiety. Um, we're doing it in the service of something bigger, like wellness, or I regulate my emotions with my partner because I want to stay married. Because sometimes the things that I want to say in the moment are not helpful to a long-term relationship. Can anyone relate to that? And so, like, it's like, Mark, take the high road. Come on, Mark, we can get through this. Mark, don't say it. Don't say it, Mark. You know you shouldn't do it. Um, so it is in the service of something. So if the other person is not skilled, Greg, it's hard. This is why everyone needs to develop the skills. Now, the last thing I want to say um, about definitional issues is that for years, myself included, I would confuse emotion regulation with things like my personality and temperament. Um, what I mean by that is I'm a neurotic person. Anybody on my team? Like, I worry about everything. People know me. I worry about even why I worry. And some people who know me really well know that I worry about why I worry about why I worry. And that's with 25 years of psychological training and teaching emotional intelligence. So you can imagine what it would be like without it. So my natural tendency is to go there. And for years as a kid, I just thought that my automatic responses, which were very strong feelings, they were permanent. They were who I was. There was nothing to do with my feelings except just accept the fact that I had strong emotions and alienation and fears and anxieties, and I didn't know what to do, so I would cry or scream or eat. Um, and then I learned, wait a minute, that's my temperament. That's my personality. That is completely separate from my ability to regulate and manage my emotions. So I just want to make sure that people understand that. Does this resonate with people? That your proclivity towards experiencing emotions, whether it be anxiety or anger, is different from your the knowledge and skills that you can develop to help you manage your feelings. Okay, it's very empowering. So I'm going to invite Robin in. Robin, you're the next contestant on Permission to Feel is Us. You can say something if you like.
I want to know what my prize is before I play.
Your prize is taking people through an exercise. So just before we jump into that, I'm just trying to see. Yeah, the truth is, Sonia, you know, it's funny because some people will say things like, well, this child regulates really well in this classroom, but not that classroom. Or for some reason, everybody loves my husband at work, but he's a real blank at home, which means that we can't help it for the most part. The reason why we can't help it, if there is that we haven't learned the skills. Like, once you have skills, great things can happen for you in life. Without skills, sometimes it is that I can't help it because you just don't know. And nobody wants to be mean and hurtful. Nobody wants to self-mutilate. Nobody wants to drink alcohol until they're oblivious. It's because they don't have the knowledge and skills to support them in doing other things. So one of the things, Robin, we were going to do tonight was take people on a kind of a journey of what they learned about emotion regulation, right?
Yeah. In fact, I was
So,
thinking that what we might do, hello, everybody. I'm so happy to be back, and especially by popular demand. That feels really good to me. And thank you, Mark and Michelle behind the scenes. I thought we would do a little bit differently. So imagine then that we're all going back to your childhoods. Mark and I are coming with you. So you're going to set yourself down somewhere. Float yourself backwards in time. Go into your kitchen, into your schoolroom, into your bedroom, in front of your house, on your steps, somewhere where you used to hang out. And notice the people around you. Notice how they are managing their emotions. Is it helpful the way they manage their anger, their frustration, their disappointment? Look around, notice anybody living in your house with you, or the important people who are in school, teaching you, leading the school. And we're there. We're just going to ask you to notice. Just notice. Take a look around you. See people in the living room. There is a living room. Outside on the street. What happens when they get angry? Your mom or your grandma, your dad, your big sister, your neighbor. Tell us, what do they do? Because what they're doing, what you're telling us as we're visiting with you while you look at your childhood, is what you're learning. We always say to parents and the grown-ups in children's lives that children are watching you and learning from what you do. So Steve, what do you mean by attachment? What are you learning about emotion regulation, about managing of feelings? Tell us. Thank you for sharing that, Jane. So Jane learned that her mom got silent. It was yelling in Valerie's house. What we experience sets our behavior in many ways. Yes, Steve. Kim learned the message, you're too sensitive. Jan learned not to show any emotion. Drink your emotions. Yelling. It's hard to go back there and watch that, right? Doesn't feel very good. So I have another question. So here Mark and I are with you in your childhood, and we're listening to you tell us what you're watching around you. What are you going to do with this learning? How are you going to take it with you? So looking back now as the adult, how did you take that learning with you? How did you integrate the messages of shutting down, getting easily angered, suppressing vulnerable feelings, and take it to your adult life? Julie, you have my last name. You realize that you had a choice not to respond the same way as adults around you. Jan learned not to show emotion. Thank you for sharing this. Mark, what did you learn that you brought with you?
I've been thinking, once when I think about this too much, I start thinking, oy, oy, oy. I learned different things. So I learned from my mother that you basically lock yourself in your room and have a breakdown. And I learned from my father that you just don't control. You just yell, scream, get red in the face, and look mean. And I spent 50 years of my life trying to combat that.
I learned pretty much the same thing from my dad. From my mom, I certainly learned that shutting down was the way to deal with emotions. But I did find that helpful ultimately, because at least she was doing something with her emotions. So I also learned that you could actually do something with your emotions. You didn't have to let them overtake you. You didn't have to scream and yell like my father did, or slam his hand on the dinner table and then get up and leave. You could do something else. So that was an important lesson for me, even though I wasn't aware of it at the time.
The other thing I was thinking about just now is that someone wrote about blaming, is that like I learned that it's like there was no like leeway, if that's the right. There was no gray. It was all like things are fine or you're punished. You're gonna get a spanking, or it was hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. The littlest thing would activate, and then, you know, my mother would run after us with a pan in the backyard. Love those summer nights. So,
I also learned, and I just want to share this because I'm wondering if
sure.
other people have had this experience as well. I learned from my own experience of being with people who were out of control. And my case, my uncle had a very bad temper, and when I was with him, I would just be very still. And I learned that I could do it. And I learned that I could wait until he was done being angry
Mm-hmm.
or he was done being crazy. And that was a skill that has served me actually very well in my life.
Well, I think the other thing that's important around this is that, for me, I learned very early not to tell my parents about any of the bad things or the things that would make them see me as not being okay, because they would get activated, and then that would also, my mother would have a breakdown, my father would tell me to toughen up. And so there was no place for me to, there was no, they made my emotions unavailable to them.
But what you're talking about importantly is, and what I was talking about is that in those interactions, we became smarter, even though we didn't know it at the time. We learned how to deal with those
Mm-hmm.
interactions to save ourselves. Kids are very smart. They develop strategies and coping mechanisms that are self-protective.
They are. Although, like, I mean, that's why, I always tell people I feel blessed that I had my Uncle Marvin. I feel blessed that I got involved in the martial arts. I feel blessed that I went for therapy, because, like, somehow you've got to model, or you've got to see some healthy strategies modeled, right? If you never witness any of them, it's really hard.
It is really hard. And those of us who are lucky enough to have some adults around us who handle things well helpfully and effectively did have those models. But I do think it's important to think back and not just to ask the first question that I asked, tell us what you learned, but tell us how you dealt with it too.
Hmm.
And then see how that has worked out for you in your life.
Yeah.
And now,
Go
and
ahead.
now we're still learning. And now we're still
Yeah.
learning.
And so the other thing that's, um, you know, I think when you had unpleasant experiences and witnessed poor regulation, and then you realize there's another way. It does the lessons I think that many of us are talking about in the chat are that like you learn a lot about what you don't want to be, right, from these. And it's not that you don't learn anything. It's that sometimes some of the best learning is from these adverse experiences, that help us to be better people as we grow. And so
Yes.
like you think to yourself, I could never dismiss someone's feelings. I would never blame them, or I would do my best to not be so activated.
Yeah, exactly. I looked at my mom and the way she dealt with her emotions by shutting down and thought, I really don't want to do that. It's not good relationship building.
So just a few things about these unhelpful strategies, right? Summarizing, right? We often learn them early from people who didn't have EI training. They don't require a lot of effort. I always say it's like if Robin gets on my nerves, I can say, "Go blank yourself." Like doesn't re- there's no self-monitoring there. They're just letting it go. When Robin drinks her sixth glass of wine, there's no like um, effort in that. You just keep it drinking. You don't have to monitor. Whereas most of the helpful strategies, as we'll talk about in a moment, require actually a tremendous amount of effort. Um, Oftentimes, these unhelpful strategies become our permanent bad habits, but they also can feel good. Like sometimes you punch someone in the face, it can feel good. Um, Telling someone to go blank themselves actually can feel empowering. But going back to that point earlier, um, is that, telling everybody to go blank themselves at work or in your family isn't a recipe for having long-term healthy relationships. Um, Drinking that seventh glass of wine every night is not a recipe for well-being. And so, do you see how all of this, right, that in the service of building and maintaining relationships and goals and having well-being? And as you can see here, don't solve the problems, typically negatively impact relationships, derail us from our goals, etc. So,
At least one person, Mark, said that they loved your humor, so they knew you were kidding when you said that I drink 6 glasses of wine. Just saying that out
yeah, that's fine, but whatever. um, so, what is it about healthy emotion regulation? Well, a few things. It's developmental, it's relational, it's oftentimes specific to the emotion, right? How I deal with anger is not how I deal with anxiety. It's context dependent, it's personalized. And I think one of the most important things in the teaching of emotion regulation is that there's no criterion of correctness. So, if Robin likes to do hula hooping, am I right?
It's true.
And so I'm not going to hula hoop. It's not my thing. But if it helps you burn off calories and manage your stress, go for it. I do yoga or I do, lifting weights. Some people like to call a particular person. Some people don't want to call that person. And so, importantly, going back to the whole tenets of this book club and the work, is that our goal for ourselves and others is to become compassionate emotion scientists for ourselves and others who help ourselves explore the strategies and try them out and see the ones that work best for us. And then if I were working with Robin or Robin's working with her patient or her child, right, it's helping that person discover the strategies that work best for them. Now, do
And
you see?
also,
Go ahead.
I also want to, someone in the chat room whose name I can't see because of the way my screen is right now, was saying that even strategies that you learn at an early age you often end up repeating even though you don't want to. And so I would just, to your point, Mark, have compassion for yourself, because those are the strategies that are easy to access when you're just in the throes of it. And it can be more deliberate. You can do more deliberate practicing when you learn new skills. And then that practicing over time becomes your new habit. So have compassion and patience.
We have to unlearn, learn, practice, refine, and make it permanent. So we've been talking a lot about this, but we haven't gotten into the specific strategies. And for those of you who are familiar with our work, I'm just going to share with you a few. And Robin, tonight what we're going to focus on is the distancing ones. And so prepare ahead for your hot air balloon strategy. So number one, remember the goal of all of our work is to give ourselves and everyone else the permission to feel. That there's no good or bad in our feelings. Anxiety is anxiety. It's legit, and it's okay, and that's the first step. The second is when we're highly activated, we have to find ways to deactivate. Just think about how our brains operate. When you get triggered, you go into survival mode, fight, flight, freeze mode, not I want to be your best friend mode or tell me more mode. And that's why those breathing exercises can really help, because they help shift um, your nervous system. Obviously, self care, sleep, nutrition, exercise, tons of research on all these things. Self care, meaning just doing things you enjoy. Robin, are you still singing new songs when you're making your bed?
Well, I'm still making my bed and singing gratitude songs. Yes.
Um,
Every day. Every day.
we know that the mere presence of someone who you find loving and caring and supportive is a strategy. They don't got to say anything, they just got to be there for you. Cognitive strategies, which is where we're going to focus on tonight, and then routines, just setting yourself up for success. So, we haven't talked about this in any of the book clubs yet. And so, tonight, what I thought we'd do is we talk about four forms of a very interesting area of emotion regulation, which is called psychological distancing. The first is just self talk. And so, many of us have learned this. I think I can, like the choo choo train. Um, but I think importantly, what research has shown is that there's something that's called compassionate self talk. And what that means specifically is it's just a little twist. Instead of saying, I think I can, you just basically pause and say something like, Mark, you can get through this. Mark, you got this. My favorite strategy is one that I say to myself when I'm really kind of in a place of like deep rumination. Um, and I've been really observing this just to share with you because it's been a difficult year for many of us. And there are some days that are very rainy days in our lives, and then days where you're just like, I've got the world on a string. And then the next day you feel like shit again. You're like, all right, what is going on here? Like yesterday I was like dancing in my hallways and singing and having fun. And then today all of a sudden my anxiety is back again. And so given that I'm 51 and I've had about 350,000 examples in my life of rainy days and sunny days, I say to myself something like the following: Mark, there have been rainy days and there's been sunny days. Today is one of the rainy days, but guess what? It's impermanent. You know this feeling is impermanent because you have evidence from your life that there have been sunny days. Does this resonate with people? This idea of compassionate self talk? Because, I mean, Robin, we've talked about this endlessly, right? How much our negative self talk has become like injected into our DNA because we've had decades, you know, of practice. It's like, it's almost like cancer. It metastasizes. It becomes in part of your immune system.
Well, and it's fed by just our social interactions. It's almost popular to be putting yourself down. Oh my God, I'm so fat, I'm so short, I'm so this, I'm such a loser. And people are saying it around you, and then you're saying it too, and you begin to believe it. And the other thing that we talk a lot about, Mark, is that people, it's easy to be compassionate to those people we love, but we forget to include ourselves in the circle of people we love and give compassion to. And it's so wonderful to do it. It actually feels good, and it is healing.
So the next one is the gift of time. So what does that mean? Well, think about this for a minute. You're freaking out about something that happened at work, and you take a breath and you say, Mark, let's will this matter in a week from now? Will this matter in a month from now? In a year from now? Is this still going to be something that's going to be bothering you? And so it's another form of distancing, which is temporal distancing. Just thinking to yourself, like this in relationships, this is a big one. Like my partner and I fight about everything and nothing. And we've been together 27 years, so we're doing okay. But nevertheless, you know, it's like, you didn't take out the garbage. I hate you, right? You promised to do the garbage and now it stinks. And then I'm like, all right, I'm pissed. Um, like, all right, is this really gonna like make or break our relationship? Um, and so think about that. Like the gift of time. Like, is this gonna matter? You know, you get someone's mean to you in a grocery store and you want to like retaliate, and you're like, am I gonna even remember this in a week from now? So that's temporal distancing. One of my favorites is called the picture frame technique. And I find this one extraordinarily helpful when I'm in an interpersonal situation with someone who I feel is not kind or is being abrasive. And what that is so if Robin, were like, let's say, berating me about something, I would imagine her as a television show or as a movie. And I would distance myself from her psychologically by saying to myself something like, wow, it is fascinating the way Robin is speaking to me right now. That's really interesting. This is a really, really kind of bad movie. And so that's another form of distancing. Does this resonate with you? So it's all these techniques to help us not be overwhelmed by the feeling and to give us that space that we need. And so another form of distancing is called the hot air balloon. And this is something that Robin and I talk about quite a bit. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Robin.
Thank you. So I was thinking about it when just a few minutes ago, when you asked me to prepare an exercise, as if I haven't thought about it a million times already. But I was thinking about it tonight, especially in relation to this year and a half that we've just spent in lockdown and anxiety and whatever. And because I'm in our home court, as I said in the chat, in New Haven today, and I haven't been here really since before the pandemic, um, I felt very close to my feelings and close to, I was walking the streets and thinking about what was like before the pandemic. And so I thought, I'm just going to take a hot air balloon. And so I'm going to invite you all to do that right now. Just imagine that you get to upholster the straw basket of your hot air balloon. You can make it nice and comfy, have some pillows there for extra comfort. Just take a hot air balloon way high above the timeline of your life that includes this very challenging year. And with all due respect to the very intense feelings we all felt on the ground with anxiety and fear and worry and grief, sadness, loneliness, anger, as well as some moments of joy that we seem to have stole from the negativity or pulled out from the negativity because of social connections and the like. And looking at the pandemic from this hot air balloon as a time in your life, what's that like for you? What do you learn when you look down at this chunk of time? What's the learning? Evokes compassion, transformative, actually peaceful. I've heard that from people. They miss the pandemic days. Transformation, healing. And if we can invite you to be more specific, enjoy every moment of life. I think that's, don't take anything for granted. The ordinary is really extraordinary. Cherish every moment. I think that's a big lesson. Gratitude, big lesson for many, including myself. An introvert's dream.
So, Robin, to build on this, to wrap up our time together today, when we're having strong feelings, right, the focus is on what's wrong, right? You know, I'm stuck in quarantine, I'm this, I'm that, like, this is bad, I'm anxious. And so maybe in that hot air balloon, we can also think about what's right, right? What's going well? When you look down from the hot air balloon at your life, what do you notice that is actually thriving? How about for you, Robin? What's one thing that you feel has been an area of thriving for you during the pandemic?
I would say productivity at work. I have felt that it was easier for me to really take a deep dive into work without the commuting every single day, and family time,
Mm-hmm.
family time. Really enjoying the cooking and eating healthy and healthy with family.
Mine is something that I've not had in 40 years, which is like connection to nature. Um, I've never had the time like to really spend like be outside, and just enjoy taking my all walks. And it's made a huge difference for me.
What I love about all of these distancing strategies is that we're in total control of doing them anytime we want. We can always choose to compassionately talk to ourselves or to ask the question, will this matter in 5 years? And sometimes it does actually, and then we need to make a different decision and to see ourselves in the picture frame
Mm-hmm.
and to rise above it and look down from the hot air balloon.
I just think about our nation's youth because that's where we spend a lot of time, and how many kids are growing up in our society across the world learning these strategies, from a very young age, and not very many. And And, when you think about how the brain is plastic and how you've got two children, one in a school and one in a home, where they are never taught these strategies. They're being bullied. They're growing up in a family that doesn't really think about feeling, and how all the criticism and negative self-talk just metastasizes and becomes, remember, neurons that wire together, fire together. Um, and then you have a child who is learning about emotional intelligence from preschool. They're questioning the way people speak to them and saying, wait a minute, like, who are you to define my reality for me? Like, I love myself actually. Like, why are you being so mean and cruel to me? And when that happens, they have strategies, right, that are positive and self-compassionate as opposed to self-critical. And imagine the child who grows up in those circumstances over time, like their relationships, their mental health, their ability to achieve their dreams. And so,
Mark, I just want to say something because of
please,
a couple of things in the chat room that not only don't many children grow up with the strategies and so they don't have them, but sometimes they're really hard to use. That in a moment where where you've just had some really upsetting news and or a big fight, where where you're grieving, it may be hard to use one of these strategies immediately.
yep.
That's okay. That's okay. Just give yourselves the permission to feel. And as you move through that feeling, there's another opportunity to talk compassionately to yourself.
Well, and I think, that's why emotion regulation is so interesting, is that it's never just one strategy, right? And so tonight we focused on these interesting cognitive ones, but when we go back to we call them the big seven, it's like some days I just want to hug. Some days I want to take that walk and just think about life. Some days I want to bullshit with my brothers on the phone for an hour to connect, right? Some days I want to do that hour and a half yoga class in the heat to just burn off the stress. And other times I'm using the cognitive strategy. So I think ultimately our goal is to have this tool bag of helpful strategies. And so on that note, Robin, I know you've got another gig coming up at 9.
I have to do a podcast on gaslighting right now.
All
So
right.
thank you
So
so
thank
much,
you, Robin, for
everyone.
joining. Have a great evening, Robin, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks.
Everyone else, I want to end tonight's book club by actually helping you like practice these strategies. So you're not going anywhere yet. Don't you hang up on me yet. I want you to think about all the strategies: self-care, relationships, managing life smartly, all the distancing strategies. Is there one that you can commit to trying out this week? Like right now, today, tomorrow? Like when you're feeling an emotion, which one of all the distancing strategies kind of connects with you the most from today? The picture frame, mindful breathing, movie. Come on, everybody. What's your strategy? Breathing, compassionate self-talk, hot air balloon. Nice. Lots of breathing exercises, physical exercise, maybe some sleep. You know, one of the things that I say always is we should never worry alone. So if you're in a bad, dark place, try to find that Uncle Marvin. So research shows that less than 50% of us will use these strategies. So I'm going to ask you right now, what would be the best outcome for you right here, right now, or in the next week, if you were to apply that strategy, what do you notice? What will be different for you if you actually apply this strategy? You'll worry less, less stress, more centered, calmer, more at ease. Second to last question for tonight. What is an obstacle? What's going to get in the way? So for example, exercise has been one of my new strategies. What gets in the way is I'm going to bed way too late and I wake up tired and not wanting to exercise. Forgetting old patterns, negative self-talk, bad habits. So now the question is, what can you do? What can you do to support you in tackling the obstacles? So for me, it's been going to bed earlier. And then when I get up at 6, I actually feel refreshed. Maybe it's setting a goal and putting a reminder, hot air balloon in on your mirror in your bedroom. Maybe it's setting reminders on your phone to do that mindful breathing exercise at a certain point in the day. Okay. Let's all take a nice long inhale and a nice long exhale. Breathing in and breathing out. I'm going to share with you my favorite mindfulness breathing exercise to wrap up our time together. Let's all breathe in and say in. And breathe out and say out. Breathe in and say deep. Breathe out and slow. Breathe in and say the word calm. Breathe out and say ease. Everybody breathe in and put a gentle smile on your face. And just say release. Okay, how are you feeling now? So I'm going to ask you to somehow or another make yourself accountable for your strategy. If you can go on Instagram and post your strategy, or Twitter, Facebook, just maybe teach someone that you love and care about. Teach your followers on social media about psychological distancing. Because another way to get better at these strategies is to do what I do. You just keep on teaching to everybody, because then they're just in your head all the time. So on that note, I'm going to wish you all a fantastic Thursday night, Thursday morning, wherever you are. And we'll see you next week. Will be our last one. So we're pushing 1 week. We're going to tie it all together next week. And have a wonderful night and a wonderful day. Good night, everybody. Thank you, Michelle, for helping us out tonight.
Anytime.
Get in that hot air balloon.
Yep, I will.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.